for his personal use.
Per household, 3, or per person at the household?
Per person in a household. I believe that we will have an increase in prescriptions from physicians for patients who want to use medical cannabis for the treatment of their disease. They have to ask those licensees,
are you making money?
Are you making money? Yes. For the cultivation of cannabis at home, you can actually get your seeds from the cannabis associations, from the cultivation associations. Even if you're not a member, you should actually be able to get your seeds for home grow from them. So that's the plan.
From the Cultivation Association?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ICBC, where the World Meets Cannabis podcast. We're very excited to be here in our studio in Ljubljana with an extremely special guest. He is a partner at Dentons Law Firm, and he is located in Berlin, and he is actually heading the European Cannabis Group for Dentons, and there's probably no more knowledgeable person in Germany or the rest of Europe than our very esteemed guest, Peter Homberg. Welcome to the podcast.
Alex, thank you very much for the kind introduction.
It's great. We've known each other for years, and we've kind of seen the whole story of cannabis in Germany unfold, and I want to get to that in a second. But one thing I'm really curious about is, so Dentons is it the largest law firm one of the largest law firms in the world? It's a very esteemed international law firm, and so could you tell us a little bit about how you became the head of the European Cannabis Group for Dentons, how that unfolded?
Yeah, actually, you're right. Dentons is one of the largest law firms worldwide, with a great number of different offices in various jurisdictions in Europe, in Northern America, South America, as well as in Asia. Mm-hmm. Not to forget Middle East and Africa. And I think since 2 weeks also in the Philippines. With the law firm who has joined our network in Manila.
Amazing.
It actually happened back in 2016, some time ago, when Germany was actually on the edge to legalize cannabis for medical purposes. There was, and we can come back to that in a minute, a very interesting judgment of the highest administrative court in Germany, the so-called Bundesverwaltungsgericht, mm-hmm. Who at that point in time allowed patients who at that point in time had only a special permit from the BfArM to use cannabis for their treatment of their disease, they actually, one of the patients actually wanted to grow at home. Mm-hmm. And he actually informed the BfArM, which is the German FDA, that following the permit to use cannabis for the treatment of his disease, and there were only 600 to 700 patients at that point in time, mm-hmm. he wants to grow. And the BfArM,
he wants to grow at his house
at home, because for various reasons. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm allowed to use it for the treatment of my disease, why can't I grow it at home? And the Germans are very good in sending cease and desist orders, and that's what the BfArM did. And he went to court mm-hmm. Through all the instances, and in the last instance, before the highest administrative court in Germany, he actually won, with giving him the allowance, the permission actually to grow cannabis for his treatment at home.
So setting a precedent, basically.
Yes, absolutely. Uh-huh. That was, at that point in time, for the legislator, for the government, a nightmare. 600 growers of cannabis in Germany allowed by the highest administrative court. So what they did, they very quickly reacted to it. In 2017, in March 2017, they legalized cannabis for the treatment of, in the medical side, for the treatment of various diseases, upon prescription from physicians. And of course, also then with the goal to disallow the respective home grow at that point in time. Actually,
the irony abounds, but go on.
That is
7 years later.
That's 7 years later, and that's actually at that point in time they were looking for cultivators in Germany. So. What happened, but at that point in time, was
the tender you're talking about.
Immediately in March 2017,
Yeah.
there was a need for various patients who got the prescription from the physicians to get cannabis products, mainly flowers at that point in time, and all of a sudden there were importers and of course cultivators. And as you know, Canada and the US, but in particular Canada, were years ahead of Germany in that respect at that point in time, back in 2017. And we had a cannabis practice, and we still have a cannabis practice in Canada at Dentons. And all of a sudden, there was a great interest in the German market by, in particular, the Canadian cultivators.
I remember it well.
And back in April 2017, just 1 month later, the first cultivator wanted to enter the German market, and I can name them because it's public domain. It was Canopy Growth, and we advised them how they could enter the market. They acquired a company which was called MedCan at that point in time, which was their actually distributor for the small amounts of THC-rated products of flowers for the small group of patients in the German market. But all of a sudden, it exploded. So the question was, who can handle that in Germany for them? Who has the knowledge? And I'm heading also the life sciences practice in Germany. And I'm advising life sciences companies, which means companies in the fields of pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, medical devices, and biotechnology already for over 20 years. I was myself in the industry.
So it was a natural fit.
So it was a natural fit that cannabis for medical purposes is then handled by me and my team from the Berlin office.
Now, did you vie for this position? I'm curious, or was it appointed upon you, or were you interested in?
No, I was really interested in it because we were following the court decision and the development of that court decision at the highest administrative court in Germany closely, because there was something on the edge, I would say, very interestingly. And as such, we deeply dived into the new legislation. There was a new law, which was the Cannabis Act for medical purposes, in order to advise our clients accordingly. And since then, we are very much looking forward to each and every regulatory changes.
That is amazing, because I remember I met you in 2017, and I had been in the industry for a while. And I was really impressed with what you were doing. I was impressed how you were doing it, and I just thought it was kind of cool that, hey, Dentons has a cannabis division in Europe. So that's phenomenal. And then we take it 7 years later, and I think the big elephant in the room these days is Germany is close to legalizing, decriminalizing, modernizing something. So we hear a lot about what's going to happen in Germany, and we hear about phase 1, we hear about phase 2, and I hear some other interesting things about like seeds and clones, and I hear things about medical cannabis in Germany. Would you give us a quick overview, Peter, of what the heck is going on in Germany? Because I know a lot of people are really excited about it.
How much time do we have? Can speak about that for the next 2 hours.
I mean, how about the cursory overview?
Yeah. Now, I think the milestone was, of course, back in 2017, the legalization of medical cannabis. I think that was really the milestone and triggering the following events, which was then the new government, which was elected, actually introduced the legalization for recreational cannabis.
The Ampel
the Ampel coalition.
The traffic light coalition.
Which is the Social Democrats, the Free Democrats, and the Green Party. They introduced that into their coalition agreement with 2 sentences only. They wanted to legalize cannabis for recreational purposes. So that's how they actually started. Then months, really nothing happened. What they then actually did, they tried to find a way, how can we do that? Because there is a very strict legal framework, as we all know. There are the 3 different UN conventions, the most important one, the 1961 UN Single Convention, of which Germany is also a member, but not only Germany, it's also the European Union, which is a member. As such, the restrictions for the legalization of recreational cannabis, not only cannabis, but for any kind of narcotics, and cannabis is, of course, respectively defined as such, is prohibited. So that is actually what the German government took into consideration. When they put that into their coalition agreement, nobody thought about the legal hurdles. And all of a sudden, there were more than one legal hurdle. Not only the UN conventions, and we know, for example, Canada back in 2019 legalized cannabis for recreational purposes, not really taking much care about the UN conventions. However, Germany is a member of the European Union, as we all know. As such, they have to adhere to the respective also European regulations, which means in particular the Schengen Agreement, which is the basis for the European Union, and of course all the protocols following out of this Schengen Agreement. So back in October 2022, the German government presented a legalization concept. Very nicely, I would say, drafted. They wanted to cultivate cannabis for recreational purposes in Germany under the government control. They wanted to distribute this cannabis for recreational purposes via licensed dispensaries. License means also under government control, in order to legalize cannabis for recreational purposes in Germany to the full extent as we actually have seen that in Canada. They knew that there are legal hurdles, so they went to the European Commission and asked, can we actually do that? Why did they ask? Because they could have moved forward, of course. Because the European Commission, as well as all other European member states, could initiate a respective legal actions before the European Court of Justice for the breach of the Schengen Agreement.
So just so the audience understands what this means, basically you're saying that the EU is basically acting as a centralized federal authority that has can be punitive, take punitive measures, if you, maybe that's not the right legal word, but they could sue the respective country. They could withhold funds for other things, for example.
Yeah, punitive actions, I would say, is the right the right expression. You know, Alex, they could actually initiate, as I said, respective legal proceedings before the European Court of Justice.
Right.
And Germany had just recently lost again, I would say, big thing before the European Court of Justice, and they didn't want to risk that again, which is, I think, understandable.
What did they lose?
The first one was with regard to the toll for private cars and their toll system, which they wanted to implement, which was not in line with
the toll system in the road.
Yeah.
The Autobahn, or but just for
No, we have it for trucks, for all trucks which are on the German Autobahn. But we didn't have it. We don't have it for private cars. Other countries have it for private cars, like Austria or France.
Exactly.
Czech Republic. They are all having also.
So we're digressing, but I'm such a political science nerd. Why would that not be constitutionally legal or why would that be not okay?
Because they wanted to privilege the German drivers, the German inhabitants, the German people. They wanted to reimburse them.
An honest.
That was one
Du bist ganz ehrlich.
that was one of those plans.
Cool. So you think that because that was shot down or they lost that decision, you think that was one of the reasons they didn't?
No, they actually were asking the European Commission, can we do it?
The European Commission said,
and our Minister of Health, Karl Lauterbach, said we had very productive talks with the European Commission.
Was that the euphemism of the day?
And all of a sudden, this whole plan was in the bin, unfortunately, because I think that would have been the best way to legalize it.
So I have a question. You think that would have been the best way to legalize it? If you were the health minister of Germany, would you have done it the Canadian way and just have eschewed all advice from the higher ups, if you will?
Very difficult question.
Do you? Let me rephrase it so I don't put it on you per se. But do you think? What do you think would have happened if Germany had just gone for it like that?
They would have been sued before the European Court of Justice, which would have put the whole program on a hold. It would
an injunction?
You can't proceed if you're really sued and stopped by the European Court of Justice to initiate the respective law for the legalization. So if you would ask me what would I have done, there are, of course, ways, from my point of view, to at least use the I wouldn't say loopholes, but the possibilities in the UN conventions and in the Schengen Agreement. And I would probably have decided to do it the same way as Switzerland, for example, is doing it, that we have scientifically controlled pilot projects in various cities, in various regions, in order also to gain some data. What kind of impact does it have, the legalization, on the community, on the patient, on the users, and then decide how we can actually move forward. Maybe lobby then with these generated data the proper legalization.
Now this is basically. And this is would be phase 2. We'll talk about phase 1, but this is more of a phase 2 thing where you would because what the European, as far as I understand, legalization is okay under the auspices of health and research. Are so some of the things you're talking about within the convention?
Yeah. That's correct. For medical purposes, you can, of course, legalize cannabis, which Germany has done, which is totally in line with the UN conventions and the respective Schengen Agreement. And if you then start a scientific project, scientific purposes is also possible under the UN conventions. If you start a scientific project, trying to understand what kind of impact the legalization of cannabis for recreational purposes has, and then gain data from that, and then decide how you're going to do it in the future. That is a perfect legal way how you could do it. You still would have the control, of course, with regard to the cultivation, with regard to the distribution. Well, not each and every consumer would have got access to the respective sources in these pilot projects, because you can't roll that out nationwide or German-wide. You can use it in or can establish it in various cities. For example, let's talk about Berlin. We have maybe 10, 15 different dispensaries where actually registered consumers could buy cannabis for recreational purposes. And this is then spread out in other cities, maybe in other areas, other regions in Germany. And then, of course, you can actually gain the respective data, which you correctly said is actually the second step of the legalization model which Germany is now using. But that would have been my favorite solution, very much the same as Switzerland is doing it right now.
That's yes, I tend to agree with you, Peter. I'm a decrim guy for sure, but I think you could decrim and still not have the social clubs. You could have just said, well, we'll have possession. You can grow 3 plants. That's pretty benign. But the social clubs. So the social clubs, phase 1. Let's talk about everyone's beloved phase 1 in Germany, which is controversial at least. I've heard a lot of different opinions on phase 1. I have my own take on it. Very curious to hear your take on phase 1, social clubs, Peter. What are you thinking?
Let's talk about the facts first, I would say.
Okay.
What is phase 1?
Okay.
What does it all encompass? So in phase 1, we have also 2 different steps. Step 1 is home grow. Each and every adult can actually grow up to 3 female plants at home and can use the cannabis cultivated from these plants for his personal use.
Per household, 3, or per person at the household?
Per person in a household. So if you have three people in a household, you have nine female plants.
Interesting.
And that's the first step. The second step is what you said, cannabis clubs, which is not really the cannabis club system which we know from Spain. It's totally different. It's, I would say, cultivation associations, where up to 500 members can actually grow cannabis in a community. And can then use the cannabis which is cultivated at the cultivation association for their own personal use.
Okay.
For the recreational.
So they can hire a surrogate, or they can choose a surrogate to grow for them? Do we know?
We don't know that yet by heart, because the Cannabis Gesetz, the Cannabis Law, the Cannabis Act for legalizing the recreational use of cannabis is not very precise on that. It's relatively silent how this structure should function. And they leave it to the states within Germany to really then establish the legal framework under which conditions the cultivation associations can operate. So it could be, yes, you're right, it could be, or the assumption is right, that they actually can source that out, that they can combine their need or their cultivation possibilities and source that out to a party who has actually the possibility to grow and has the knowledge to grow. I don't believe that this will materialize, frankly speaking, but we'll see what the various states will come out with.
And the onus is put upon the locale or the region or the Bundesstaat of each Bundesstaat can make up their own time, place, and manner rules, or locales or municipalities.
I wouldn't say that you can foresee chaos, but you can see a heterogeneous approach. Because this federal law leaves it now to the various states within Germany to really in very much detail define the legal framework, how these cultivation associations can operate.
Then we can assume the regulations will be more liberal in Berlin and more strict in Bayern, for example?
Yeah, the assumption is not out of the world, I would say. We'll see how that will really work out. But first of all, the law has to pass the parliament. It has done so already in the first reading, the second and third reading, which is the normal way in order to establish respective laws. Lawmaking is planned for next week in Germany, and we'll see what the outcome will be.
As of right now, is that vote scheduled on the what do they call it? The Bundesordnungs, what do they call it?
Bundestag has an agenda, of course. I have looked yesterday. It was not on the agenda yet, but that doesn't mean anything. It could be put on the agenda. It's put on the various committees which have to look at the law as well. And from there, let's assume it would pass second and third reading next week. It will be retransferred to the Bundesrat, which is the council, and from there it will be either passed and then only be signed by the president for the implementation, or actually referred, which is possible, to a mediation committee if the Bundesrat decides that there should be additional amendments and changes in the law.
Right. And so right now, most people are assuming that when it gets to the Bundesrat, it's going to go through because it's not politically expedient for anybody to oppose it because of how many Greens are in the local districts. This is just a little bit that I've heard. And the Greens could then stop it if SPD wanted to. I'm a little confused because I'm not an expert on German politics by any means, but I thought basically it's not. Basically, the opinion is that it will pass out of the Bundesrat.
Yeah, the Bundesrat doesn't have a veto right. It is not a law which the Bundesrat has to actually the possibility to stop it. But they can actually ask for additional amendments, which they have done already. Because before it came to the parliament, it was already being discussed within the Bundesrat, who actually said we would like to have a number of amendments. As such, then the law was being retransferred to the various ministries, and everybody was working on various parts of that law. And now the new amended draft bill looks a little different in some respects.
So they could I wouldn't say grievance, but they could say, well, we don't agree with this new little change, for example.
For example, yeah. But we have to look into some other effects or some other parts of that draft law which are interesting for in particular the cannabis industry on the medical side. You know, what is happening as well, and that's in the draft law, is that cannabis and THC-related products will be taken out of the German Narcotics Act.
Okay, so I want to get to that in just a second because I actually think that is the most exciting thing. So let's just finish up phase one here. First, there's two phases of phase one, and the first phase is what's going to happen. Let's say the Bundestag passes it, and then it goes through the Bundesrat, and let's say around April 1st, it becomes legal. Well, what's becoming legal is 3 plants you can grow now, and you can possess, 25, 50 grams?
25 grams if you are in the public, and 50 grams if you're at home.
50 grams if you're at home. And then the second phase of phase one will be like July. They're saying then they implement the social club aspect.
These cultivation associations, but at the same time, and that's within this first step, is that the German Narcotics Act will be amended.
Okay, so now here I think this is the elephant in the room, what we're about to talk about now. Now, this is what I don't think a lot of people know, and this is a little more esoteric when it comes to the KNG law, and it's something that I'm very excited about. We know that the market driver in Germany or in Europe right now is the German medical marijuana market. That's where the real market lies. Yes, there's CBD stuff, but that's a little ambiguous. With the German medical market, you pretty much know right where things stand.
Yeah.
Cannabis is coming off the narcotics list. Will this, if passes, will this be part of a phase one? Will this happen like April assuming it goes through the Bund? Okay, so Peter, please tell us, what does cannabis coming off the narcotics list, which I'm getting like goosebumps just talking about it, what does that mean for the medical marijuana industry in Germany?
I don't have my crystal ball with me. So,
what do you think that might mean?
It definitely. Well, let's take a look into the current prescription policies. Today, a physician who wants to prescribe cannabis to a patient is prescribing a narcotic. He needs to have a special permission to do that. He needs to use actually special prescription blocks in a different color in order to prescribe a narcotic for patients for the treatment of his disease. That is, to a certain extent, a psychological hurdle from my point of view. If you just change that into an RX product, which means it's just a product which is being prescribed as any other RX product.
For example, what would be an example of another RX?
For example, any kind of heavy painkillers, for example, who are not a narcotic, but who are under prescription. So that is something which is comparable to that then.
Okay.
And there are, of course, a great number of different pharmaceuticals which have to be prescribed in order to get it from the pharmacy. You can't just get it off the shelf. It's not everything which is not OTC, over the counter. And as such, I believe that we will have an increase in prescriptions from physicians for patients who want to use medical cannabis for the treatment of their disease.
It'll be less cumbersome of a process for the doctor to prescribe it, for example, per se?
Absolutely. Then there are some side effects of that. The prescriptions will last longer because the prescription for narcotics has to be
1 month
filed with the pharmacy in a relatively short period of time. The other prescriptions are valid
6 months
for a longer period of time. And of course, you can use this prescription also in European member states.
Oh, wow.
But you can't get cannabis, of course, in a French.
But you could at least have it on you and not be arrested, theoretically?
Yeah, theoretically, yes.
And the courts would throw it out. You still could be arrested.
Right. You won't get a THC-rated product with a German prescription in a French pharmacy. I think that's clear. But theoretically, it's possible. But I think that the major effect is, and I think that's something which the industry is also expecting, that the prescription will increase. Everybody said, well, if you get the legalization and if you can have home grow and the cannabis cultivation associations, the medical market will decrease. I don't believe that, and a number of market players in the market don't believe that as well. It may, because a patient who is currently using cannabis, even if he's a self-payer and is not reimbursed by his health insurance company, he goes to the next pharmacy around the corner, getting a product which has a specific quality, which is overseen by the regulatory authorities, so he knows what he's getting.
And not expensive like it was a few years ago also, right?
Right.
Competition has lowered the price.
Yes, the price has been significantly decreased in comparison to 2017, 2018, 2019.
When it was like 25 euros a gram. I have another question, because will this make, I know that now if pharmacies have to handle narcotics in a certain way in Germany, right? You get it, you receive it, and then you have to repackage it or yourself, or what's the, well, I guess my question is, because when cannabis comes off the narcotics list, this will be a less cumbersome process than for doctors to prescribe it. Will it be a less cumbersome process for pharmacies to procure and purvey it? Probably not.
First of all, in Germany, the cannabis product is defined as an extemporaneous mixture. Why is that so? Back in 2017, and it's always nice to look back into history, the German government wanted to get the products quickly on the market for the patients who were in need of cannabis. So if you have an extemporaneous mixture, which means there is a pharmaceutical which is in the pharmacy, but which needs to be prepared by the pharmacist according to the prescription. You know, that is different from a ready-made pharmaceutical which you have to can take off the shelf. Those pharmaceuticals need A, a marketing authorization, which of course needs clinical trials, and B, has to go through the price-finding process of the German GBA, Gemeinsamer Bundesausschuss, which is actually for pharmaceuticals fixing the price for the market. This was avoided by putting cannabis products on the market as extemporaneous mixtures.
Got it.
But there was a but, always a but. If you have an extemporaneous mixture, the pharmacist is obliged, because he is doing something to the product, in this case, quality control, grinding, packaging, he gets 100% surcharge on the purchase price. That's the reason why we had this 25 euros at the beginning per gram.
That's Is that mandated, or is that compulsory?
No, it's in the law actually. So the pharmacist had to do that. Of course, they were happy to do it, but they had to do it. Yeah.
That's absolutely fast. So basically, they already had this provision that didn't mean that they had to adhere to such stringent standards like other narcotics might be with cannabis specifically.
So, well, the definition of cannabis
products, extemporary mixtures,
extemporaneous mixtures will not change. And I think what is clear, even if the cannabis products will be taken out of the Narcotics Act and put into or transferred into the new Cannabis Act, probably the same security measurements will apply. There will not be less security, for example, putting it in a safe, having a safe place for the...
You don't think so?
No, this will probably not happen. Because the security measurements for medical cannabis, from my point of view, will not be reduced. Okay. We will have the same handling process of those products as if they were narcotics.
Fascinating. And so it seems like they had a little bit of special status beforehand, and now they won't have any. It'll be the opposite, because another drug that wouldn't be a narcotic would not have to be handled as stringently as cannabis, you think, is going to be still handled.
Yeah. Well, no. If you have a morphine, for example, a morphine rated product, this is the same as it's a narcotic. It's handled especially at the other pharmacies. You can't just put it on the open shelf. So, and it will remain the same. There will be no changes to that.
Okay. So the main issue of cannabis coming off the narcotics list is that the doctors will be able to prescribe it. Yep. I don't want to say with impunity, but they have more leeway.
Yes, absolutely. That is, from my point of view, the most important effect of taking cannabis and cannabis-related products, THC-related products, out of the German Narcotics Act.
Well, I think this is I think to me this is almost the biggest thing that's happening this is what's going to have the most effect immediately, I think. And what I've also heard is there's no more tender for domestic production in Germany when this passes.
Nobody knows about that.
Could you speak to nobody knows? I've heard that they're going to open up domestic production. They won't put quotas on the limits of how much you can grow. Can you speak to that, Peter?
There are many rumors in the market right now. So back in 2018 actually, there was a way to find cultivators in Germany, which was a tender process, as we all know. The BfArM actually tendered out respective lots for the cultivation of medical cannabis in Germany. And 3 companies have been assigned licenses at the very end of that long-lasting process, which was actually stopped by the court in the first place.
I remember the debacle.
Right, and then re-established. And Afria, as well as Demican, and Aurora won the respective 13 licenses for cultivation of cannabis, which in fact was limited in quantity, is still limited in quantity. It's actually 10.4 metric tons over a period of 4 years, which means 2.6 metric tons, if I'm not mistaken, per year, plus a certain threshold of probably 10%, which could be actually cultivated. So that is what happened at that point in time. So now, of course, also these licensees are questioning, hey, what is going to happen if the 4 years are over? Is there another tender process? Is there a licensing process for the cultivation of medical cannabis in Germany? Can others actually participate then? Or what is the BfArM actually planning? The BfArM currently is relatively silent on that. It is, of course, pending thoughts at the Ministry of Health, what is going to happen. You know, you have home grow with 3 female plants per adult, you have the cultivation associations, and then you have a limitation on the cultivation of medical cannabis with a very strict tender process. That it really doesn't
jibe too well.
Right.
Yeah.
And as such, we will see. But at this point in time, this is unclear. There's no clear path forward.
And do you know approximately what percentage of cannabis, medical cannabis consumed in Germany has to be imported?
Well, if you look into the import quantities in the last years, and let's look into 2023, but I don't have the last quarter figures, but it was around 23.4 metric tons without the last quarter of imported cannabis.
So that would be 90%.
Yeah, I would say a little less than that, because the 2.6 metric tons per annum can be increased, by a certain percentage. But
85%.
Around that figure. Well, if you ask the German cultivators, they say, no, they have a larger stake in the market.
But makes sense.
But if you start calculating it, I would say it's in that region at least. It's,
interesting, absolutely fascinating.
Whereby German politicians who are looking into the medical market for cannabis said, why don't we allow more cultivation of medical cannabis in Germany? Why do we really need to import it from various different other different countries like Canada, and there are a number of other countries right now exporting into the German market? Why can't we actually strengthen the German medical cannabis industry, which, from my point of view, is natural? Yeah. Let's do it. We know that we can do it. We know that we have 3 cultivation companies who are really experts in it. Why don't we try to at least serve the market for medical cannabis, at least to a much higher extent, from German cultivation?
So do the prices of, we won't talk about quality, that's a little bit subjective, but we can quantify the prices quite easily. The argument that, well, the German cultivators will never be able to compete in Germany with other foreign outsourcers like Colombia, Lesotho, for example. I've heard that argument. I don't know what to think about it because I actually have no idea what the costs are. I mean, you can grow cannabis for less in some of these other countries, but then you still have all these other import cost and customs cost and travel costs or shipping cost and whatnot.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, at the point in time when the various participants in that tender started to calculate what is a per gram price, an appropriate per gram price. And I can say that we were representing one of those cultivators who did not win. And we actually were sitting together and see what is the right price on a per gram basis, which makes it at least economically feasible. And now we know, and that's official, that's public domain, that the per gram price from cultivation in Germany is 220. So they are selling at 220 per gram.
They're selling it at
220 euro per gram to the B farm.
Oh, is that right? No, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So they're obviously then their production costs are, maybe we could assume half, like a euro. Maybe we're getting into little
that's
precarious ground.
Yeah,
here.
no, that indeed, because those parties or those participants in the tender process, they originally wanted to win it. They were significantly calculating it and at the very low end. As our client, who did not win, actually did it as well, but it was still more than the 220. So the question which you have to ask those licensees:
Are you making money?
Are you making money? Yes or no, which I can't answer. Of course, the setting up of a cultivation site for medical cannabis in Germany is expensive because the security
millions,
security measurements, of course, and all the infrastructure which you
Tens
need.
of millions it can be.
So very difficult to say how much, at least, but this has to be amortized.
For sure.
Then, of course, you're talking about a different price structure, of course, than 220 per gram.
Right.
From my point of view.
Right.
But we'll see how this works out. I believe that the German cultivation sites, the German cultivators, definitely can compete with all the others around the world, from Canada, from Holland, from Lesotho, or from wherever, because we don't have the respective transport costs. Handling is easier. And as such, but just what you said, cost structures in Germany, of course, are higher with regard to energy and labor, and what you also need is
good management and amortization can
make sense. If you're going to send a ton of cannabis from Canada to Germany, the respective transport costs are significant.
100%. Well, that's all extremely interesting stuff, Peter. I think that, basically we have three major things happening. We have a bunch of stuff with the CanG. We've got the social or the cultivation associations. We have now, what about seeds and clones? I think a lot of people ask about that. We hear seeds and clones are going to become legal in some way. Can you speak to that?
Yes, they need to become legal in some way. In which way is a little uncertain with respect to, can you just order it by Amazon for your private cultivation at home? I don't believe that's going to happen.
Darn it.
But what the German government is thinking is that for the home grow, for the growth or for the cultivation of cannabis at home, you can actually get your seeds from the cannabis associations, from the cultivation associations. And even if you're not a member, you should actually be able to get your seeds for home grow from them. So that's the plan.
From the Cultivation Association.
Yes, that's the plan. So
mal schauen, huh?
Indeed, and we will see how this will work out, because the demand, if the law would come into force on April 1st, 2024, and you allow home grow, the demand for seeds, for cultivation equipment, is enormous.
Enormous.
And the question is, how can you serve that demand? How can you satisfy that demand? And this is something which probably has not been really thought through so far.
This is such an interesting conversation. I think we're really teaching the folks, our audience, so much about what's going on in Germany right now. Peter, where would you say the opportunities are, the industry opportunities with CanG, with phase 1, with even phase 2, and with the medical, with cannabis coming off the narcotics list? I think people can come to their own conclusion by deduce from everything you said thus far of maybe of what some of those opportunities could be. Could you enumerate a few industry areas and sectors that you think are going to benefit from this?
It will be definitely very positive. I wouldn't say a boost, but very positive for the medical market, for the medical cannabis market,
Which is already the biggest market in Europe.
It hasn't been growing so fast as everybody wanted it to grow, or as it has been predicted to grow, but it's steadily growing. And there are some new ways, for example, now in order to bring together pharmacies, physicians, and patients. So there are some interesting platforms who are doing that. So this market will definitely have, from my point of view, positive impact from the new cannabis Gesetz. Home grow, and the community cultivation, as I would call it, for the existing cannabis industry, it's probably not that interesting. Except for those who are providing equipment, who are providing seeds, who are providing knowledge, who can advise those clubs how to set up the respective infrastructure. Once we know how the infrastructure will look like, from a state,
the $64,000 question,
from a state by state regulation. And I think these are the winners, I would say, from that. If the second stage is coming, which we still haven't seen as a draft law, which was actually promised to be at least put into the public by end of 2023, then we probably will see more winners from the existing cannabis industry in Germany, because if you have this pilot projects rolled out over Germany, you need to serve these pilot projects with cannabis, which are probably not the cultivation associations who are going to provide that. So that it will be probably those who are in a position, and the three licensed medical cannabis cultivators are in the top position for that.
For phase two.
For phase two, yeah.
In what regard? That they would vertically consolidate and have their own.
Well, if you.
Or they would. Oh, I get it. I get it. That they would supply.
Yes, they will supply. They can definitely extend the limited production which they have right now under the 10.4 metric tons for 4 years for the medical side. They can definitely serve the market, increase their production, and serve the market for the pilot projects.
So this sounds like when the phase two, the pilot projects, those are basically going to be de facto dispensaries that when the EU capitulates, if I may, then those will be the establishments and institutions that one could foresee being grandfathered into a license and regulate.
Yeah, and with those data which you can then generate, and as I said, this is my favorite solution for the legalization process. With those data which you can generate from these scientifically controlled pilot projects, you can actually lobby then before the European Commission and at the other member states for the legalization on a broader basis. That
makes sense. What about brands, Peter? Right now, I'm curious. If you go to a pharmacy, I think people hear about Germany that cannabis is sold in the pharmacies under medical. Can that cannabis be branded? When you go and buy a package at the pharmacy, does it have to be a benign, sterile package, or could it say? Could it have cookies on it, or like the cookies brand with a brand? Are there any brands in the German pharmacies? I'm curious.
Well, the question is what is a brand? If you mean a logo and a description of the product, well, yes, of course. We have, of course, various brands already in the German market from various companies who are importers, who have maybe their own brand or are using different brand. Bedrocan has different brands, for example, as brands. Canna Medical has different brands for their products.
Now, when I say brand, I don't mean just the name of the strain necessarily.
Yeah.
Could there be like a colorful sticker with a...
The answer is no.
Okay.
It's a pharmaceutical. It will remain a pharmaceutical and has to be pharmautically packaged.
So when you say brands, that's like the strain name. This
Correct.
is Purple
Strain,
Kush or this is whatever.
Yeah, with the specific of THC content, CBD content, etc.
Interesting. Peter, you are down here in Slovenia to speak in front of the National Council, which is basically our Bundesrat. You're speaking tomorrow in front of a packed house at the National Council. We are extremely glad to have you down here and giving the Slovenian National Council your opinion on things. Do you want to just give us a little hint into what you're going to say, or maybe I could reframe the question and saying, what do you think a country like Slovenia should do at this stage? What should they take from Germany? What should they not take? What are you going to talk about tomorrow? What do you suggest Slovenia? What do you suggest Slovenia does?
First of all, I think it's a big advantage that other countries are looking into the possibility to use cannabis, first of all for medical purposes, but also thinking about the legalization process, like Czech Republic is doing it as well. I think that's a big step forward. Slovenia has always been very cautious, looking at what's going to happen in other European member states. And as such, I will definitely report about what I believe is a real success about the medical market for cannabis in Germany. And to show the developments, show the numbers which we have for patients, the quantities, and of course also discuss a little bit whether would it be better to have local production rather than import. Or is it better to use the already established routes of importation? So that's, I think, one piece of my presentation tomorrow. From my personal point of view, cannabis is a real good addition to the possibilities for for the treatment of different diseases. If you look into chronic pain and what cannabis can do for those patients who are using other medications which have probably more side effects or not, but who are looking for a different treatment, I think cannabis is a very good alternative, and as such it has definitely its place, from my point of view, in the pharmaceuticals market. So that's number one. And number two, of course, then we're talking about the recreational market. And from my point of view, I will definitely point out that the scientifically controlled pilot project, from my point of view, is the best step forward. Look into what, first of all, controlled cultivation, controlled distribution, and of course then gaining data, getting really knowledge. What cannabis for recreational purposes can do, and then actually decide how a legalization process can go forward.
That is amazing. Peter Homberg, the man, the myth, the legend. We're so honored to have you in Slovenia and speaking to the National Council tomorrow. Thank you for coming on to the ICBC Where the World Meets Cannabis podcast. It's been a great honor. Thanks so much, Peter.
Alex, thank you so much.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week or the week after that with the next podcast. I don't know how we're going to top this one. This was really, really, really amazing. A ton of esoteric knowledge. We appreciate y'all. ICBC Berlin coming up April 16th and 17th. We'll see you there. Peace.